Sam, I missed you. It's been way too long since we've done a Gen Z episode, so I'm super pumped for what we're about to film this afternoon.
Avery, I agree. I feel like we've been all over the world and not together, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm so excited to catch up. We're doing a guest-free episode just so we have some time together, some special time. And I also want to talk to you about like all the things going on in the world, of which there are so many right now. But first of all, just like, have you been? Any big updates in your life? Do you have a dog now or something? What's happening?
I am wearing a dog sweater, so that's true. But I've had a dog for several years. My dog is 4. He's a
That's true.
Shiba Inu, which happened before Shiba Coin launched. What is new?
Yeah.
We are in the middle of planning for 2025, finishing 2024 strong. All the things are happening. How about for you?
Kind of the same. I feel like I was you because I was like basically in a new city every like 2 or 3 days over the last few weeks, and it was great and eye-opening, but really tiring, and just dealing with all the different variants of jet lag. But I'm excited for kind of to end the year and frankly to get past this election, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think 2025 is going to be really, really interesting in all of the areas that we talk about. Should we just get into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. So, Avery, the first topic I wanted to talk to you about comes a little bit from my recent travels, but also related to the episode that we actually released last week, which was a conversation that I had with 2 folks focused on Africa as a market. And one of them was the sort of leading digital payments hub in Africa. Another one was kind of an investment firm that focuses on everything from creators to sort of financial opportunities for the market. And at the event that I was in, which was in London with Stellar, we spoke to so many different people who are really focused on the group of people that they all refer to as the global majority, which depending on who's defining it can be 52% of the world, which means those who don't have like robust financial systems and are being left out of kind of the global conversation around money and wealth. And then secondly, some people define it as just the 80% of people who are not white in the world. So either way you cut it, it's a giant piece of the global puzzle. And I was just really excited in talking to all these entrepreneurs about the fact that these are all people who are coming online with technology, coming online with new entrepreneurial thinking, as new creators, as new sort of big thinkers. And we're talking millions and millions and millions of people, billions when you look add up all the countries. And I guess I was just wondering from your perspective, Avery, I know we're both based in the US, but how many of your clients do you think recognize that there is this giant group of people in LATAM and Southeast Asia and India and Africa who are all going to be coming online relatively soon and who are all starting to gain access to technology and AI and game systems and all of the things that we expect? And are they looking at that as the growth market I think it is?
Absolutely. So for context, most of the brands that we work with are in these massive sectors. Like oftentimes the target audience is anyone with a mouth, like anyone who can consume food or
Right.
beverages, or spend money or have a cell phone, things like that are really macro for a lot of our clients. So we talk about this all the time. I think the current folk, like where you look at the current economy, like it's very North American centric, or very Western world centric for a lot of our brands, but that's going to change really quickly. And I think there's totally an awareness around that. I want to hear some of the insights that you have, and you probably have some specific nuggets that are really interesting. But ever since I heard, maybe this was 2 years ago in Dubai at a conference where a woman was presenting about sort of investing in Africa, and she was like, this is not like a charitable initiative. This is a business choice because in sub-Saharan Africa, like 80% of the population is under the age of 24. I need to fact check that, but like that was what sort of stands out in my mind. I then started doing research into it and I was like, this is just so incredibly massive and such an opportunity that certainly big companies are taking note of. Now, as those kids and young adults come online, as they get money, as they get more access to information, they then want, access to consumable products, to entertainment, to a lot of things that we're very privileged to have as part of our daily lives here in the US. So I don't think any of our clients would be surprised about that. Is that where they put their money now? No. Is it where they will in the future? Yes. But I want to hear, Sam, like what are some of your takeaways coming out of your travels?
So one of the things in one of the talks we had, this woman who had a company called Tala, they have 10 million people who've been through their platform. They look at the global majority as being a 10 to $20 trillion market. So it's a pretty giant opportunity over time. It's not going to happen immediately. And they and some of the other folks we talked to talked about these are also really a whole group of people who are an entirely new user base for a lot of these systems. Right. So I think that is something that is really interesting to think about, which is when your social media platform or your toothpaste brand or your movie in the US or in Europe, you're really just fighting to try to take share away from somebody else. Whereas I think that there's an opportunity for things like Netflix and Spotify and all of those types of platforms to say, we actually still have millions and millions, if not billions of people who, as they start to sort of rise up on the economic ladder and have more access, they become new customers for those services. So that alone, I think, was really eye-opening for me. The second thing is, and I'm just going to sort of say this through the lens of the conversations I had. We met with this woman. Her name is Shivani. She's the CEO of Tala. Also with Alex Holmes, who's the CEO of MoneyGram. And MoneyGram, frankly, is doing so much for that part of the world in terms of they are the on-ramps and off-ramps around stable coins, which was very eye-opening for me. And you have 140 countries that you can now take out money in your local currency. We spoke to 2 or 3 different other folks who are all focused on wallet creation. And I think we've spent years talking about wallets in the crypto space and always thinking about it as this thing that you have to like connect on an app, right? Whereas what these folks are really looking at is that wallets are really just gateway financial instruments for people who don't have Venmo and PayPal and Chase Bank. And so they're modeling themselves much more on like Revolut and some of these just like emerging fintech companies that are trying to solve banking problems and loan problems and credit problems in these markets where most of those people are being denied those things by traditional finance. So it really was eye-opening to me to say, oh, the wallet isn't an extension like MetaMask. The wallet actually is your bank. And that was a really big insight for me on why crypto for those markets makes so much sense, because the stable coin pegged to a US dollar or to a euro or to a yuan has a lot more flexibility if you're in Venezuela or you're in Ghana or you're in another part of the world where those currencies can often be volatile. So that was a really big insight for me that I'm just continuing to look and explore into.
It makes sense. Sam, where's Tala focused? Like, what are their target markets?
India, Peru, like Central America, South America, they're looking like LATAM, Southeast Asia right now. And again, 10 million
Healthy
folks
emerging
so
markets.
far have touched their rails. We spoke to a woman from a company called Onafrique, Onafrique, which is the largest Africa digital payments gateway. That one's 15 million. So these aren't small companies. They're small when compared to PayPal or Venmo, but they're not like the 30,000 users that we often see in crypto. And I think that's really what I also really appreciated was these folks are looking at scale. They're not focused on small communities. They are looking at how do we solve problems for giant amounts of people. And I was just really impressed with that. So yeah, it just made me think if I was building a brand, I wouldn't ignore that there is an opportunity here that really is the next probably 3 to 5 year opportunity for folks who are coming on. And that does involve things like crypto on the back end, not on the front end, right? Just people just need systems. So Avery, one of the things we had when we were there is sadly did not get to interview him again this year, but Idris Elba was there again with Stellar, and he on the ground launched what was called the Akuna wallet, which is starting just in Ghana, but it is a financial instrument really focused on the creator economy for folks who can't get paid out from TikTok and YouTube because they can't get a bank account. And so now the Akuna wallet will literally give them bank account credentials so they can start getting paid, but it also then can be used for crowdfunding for their projects. It can also be used for peer-to-peer payments when they're trying to pay their crew. And all of that stuff, it was like, yeah, this is just stuff they have such a hard time doing, and they're being charged so much in fees to do so that it just seems like a natural fit. And with a name like Idris behind it, and again, he's just one of so many people building in these communities. It was just very exciting. I was really, really enthused about the potential, and why I got into crypto in the first place was these kind of stories, not just because I want Bitcoin to hit 100,000.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that because I just got off a call with our friends at Coinbase Institutional, and they were talking about how a lot of Fortune 500 companies are back into institutional crypto. the exact reasons you're talking about, Sam. It's not so they can have a wallet to mint 10,000 NFTs. It's so that they can send stable coins across markets on Saturdays for, pennies. That is a huge use case that they're seeing. And I won't, name any company names. I'm not sure exactly what's public and what's not, but for some of the biggest companies in the world. So it's really interesting to see the sort of institutional side of crypto back with a very practical use case with some of these big publicly traded companies who might not be PRing it, but are using this as a way to be more efficient.
Absolutely. All right, Avery, the next topic I wanted to ask you about in our wide-ranging conversation today is there's been a bunch of stories in the last couple of days that have come across many of my group chats about, are we ignoring a giant AI bubble? And there's been articles. One was generated by the Baidu CEO, who basically says this is the equivalent of 1999 internet. And all of those sort of pets.com brands that came out and were valued really high and then all went away within a few years when that bubble burst. So I've seen a lot of analogies to the early .com era. Of course, out of that .com era, we still got Amazon. We still got some of these incredible companies that we know today. But it did make me think that there are so many AI companies being funded. Not all of them are going to be successful. And, I keep thinking about when Gary mentioned the idea of whatever it is, 97% of all NFTs are going to go to zero. I wonder if the same is true for many of these AI companies. There's an AI for everything, as we know. But one, do you think it's bubble? And then I will also give context, which was very funny, was a letter that Goldman Sachs sent to its investors saying there is no AI bubble. Of course, you can make a lot of money in AI as an investor, and you should not avoid those stocks. So the folks who are trying to get your money are saying there's no bubble, and others who maybe look at AI as a different type of challenge are saying beware. There's a lot of froth in this market. What are your thoughts?
I would go with the latter. For one, I think, we talked about this a lot on the podcast, but I think AI is fundamentally a transformational tool for white collar professionals, for everyone, but also for white collar professionals. There was a ton of hype, and even at like these marketing summits and Brand Week and Patau and Forbes CMO Summit, it continues to be a hot topic. But at the same time, what people are not talking about is compute costs and what goes into actually making, generating these images. I think that the media platforms have integrated this really seamlessly, and they're bearing those. And by media platforms, I mean the Googles and the Metas and the Amazons. They're bearing those costs because it leads to better ad outcomes, which means advertisers spend more, so that kind of works out for them. But on the Anthropics and the OpenAIs, where it's more of a big part of their business is consumer facing and consumer centric, the compute costs are not, consumers don't really understand the compute costs and like how it costs money to run all these queries, et cetera. So I think that there will be an AI bubble bursting in two directions. One, from the sheer number of companies that have raised money with AI attached to their service or differentiator. And secondarily, from the reality of compute costs as the number of users on these platforms scale.
I think it's funny that you say that it's transforming the white collar world, because it is in two different directions also, right? It is making us much more efficient and allowing us to augment ourselves and have almost business superpowers. And there's an interview, I think it was the interview I was listening to last week with Bill Gates and Kara Swisher, where Bill Gates said he was surprised that AI actually is first coming for white collar jobs versus the blue collar jobs. We were told initially that AI was coming for the truck driver and the fast food counter person, but he was saying more likely right now it's coming for the lawyer and it's coming for the marketer, because those folks are not able to compete with this vast amount of knowledge for those tasks that a vast amount of knowledge within a certain subset can really benefit. So I think that's an interesting perspective. I am interested in, yeah, please.
Just on this sort of idea of white collar professionals, many of you all who are listening to this podcast probably spend a lot of your daily life in meetings where your job is to attend meetings. There's an agenda, there's a few moments of pleasantries. You then sit in meetings talking about doing something or reviewing work or whatever the case may be. The Atlantic wrote this really, I think it was The Atlantic. They wrote this great piece a few months ago that was like talking about how white collar work was literally just meetings now, and this sort of like meeting paradox that's exploded since COVID. And oftentimes people conflate like meetings with like doing something. And, it's something that we joke a lot about. I saw the New Yorker cartoon that was showing like chart going off a cliff, and it was like, but we had all those meetings. And I just thought it was so funny. I think that part of the reason that AI is going to replace a lot of those jobs is because a lot of people, their job is just to go to meetings.
But Avery, do you think and I'm going to be a little bit of challenging for, I mean, this affects both of our businesses, right? But like, gone are the days where you had a really like scrappy team working on something at a services based organization, and you were like, your goal was to sort of keep costs low because your client had a minimal budget. Like, at least on the larger side of advertising and experiential and all of these things that I've seen, is you have a meeting with the client and 13 people show up from the agency. Right. And most of those people are just note takers, to your point. So the people who are actually like logistically figuring out how are we building this thing, or the creative director who actually has to design something, or the artist who has to think about the invite, that stuff happens, yes. But so much of my challenge of agency and marketing culture these days is it's the business of how many hours at what rate we can charge to the client and what will they tolerate versus what's the value we want to add. And I think meetings are such a good way to make money if you're an agency, or if you're a consulting firm, or if you're in the services business. So I hear you and I agree, but I do think post COVID, as we also get back to a return to work, we are seeing, I think, more productivity from the happenstance. I walk in the hall and I see someone, I'm like, pick your brain, and suddenly I have a new opportunity that I can go to a client with. And that stuff to me is the most valuable piece of being human and being in the services business. The meeting culture we have is destroying business, in my
I
opinion,
agree.
because we are literally meeting to have meetings.
I could not agree more. Although, being in a medium-sized agency myself, I'll say like we just make such an active effort to not do that. And I know Vayner is not representative of every agency, but we have an active like culture around like if you don't need to be in a meeting, please leave. Like don't just bring 19 people from the agency because we can. Maximum 5 from Vayner. Like that's a thing I tell my teams all the time. Are we perfect? No. Sometimes do we need to have 32 people in there? Yes, because it's a briefing and 32 people, it's their job to do things for this company. But we really try to minimize that. And, we have different pricing models with different clients. But I think a thing that we pride ourselves on is being scrappy and fast and able to execute and do things, not just make meetings and decks, which of course we can certainly do those too. But when I look at our favorite clients who get the most out of us, like that's what they want and that's what we want to do too.
Yeah, and this is not a critique of Vayner in any way. It's really, we at CoinDesk will sit in on our advertisers who want to brief on how to work with us, either as a media publisher or as one of the larger events. And then it's their agencies, right? And then you have 10 people from the media company and the media agency, and then you have 5 people from the creative, and then you have 4 from the experiential team. And suddenly you are at 20 people. And I'm just like, this is a $25,000 meeting right now. And it's just kind of crazy for something that might be a $100,000 media buy when you really come down to it. So it is something that's like just interesting to me. But again, that's where I think send your AI meeting agents in. People are talking about Granola right now. I don't know if you saw that, which is like a meeting app that was like used by all the VCs. Now all the VCs said, great, this is so good, we actually want to invest in it. They just raised 20 million. And a lot of people in my sort of private Slack groups are talking about Granola as just supercharging the meeting experience. But at some point, all these AI agents are not going to be making decisions on our behalf. They're not going to be making ideally good creative output. So it's really, I think, just a condemnation of meeting culture, as you mentioned. I mean, there's another story I read, which was very interesting about Anthropic, how they have now just like the beta of a AI agent that literally just is controls your computer for you. So it can answer your emails and it can respond to your text messages,
Can I go to meetings for you?
and it can go to meetings for you, and it can book your flights and your restaurants. And right now they admit it's not very good. It's like basically half of the queries fail at present, but like still half for something that is this new is probably not the worst statistic. And they're open about that. But I'm also like, I love, if I was a brand and I was like, I could get an hour with Avery to brainstorm, that is to me the magic of hiring Vayner, right? Or Gary, or any of the creative folks that you guys have, because you guys are strategists. You have the ability to help transform their brands. The AI tooling to me has so far to go to that. And that's where I think we still are like
And
lagging
that is
behind.
why agencies are going to continue to exist. It's exactly what you said. And I think there's plenty of clients where, the ability to call up partners who deeply understand your business and what's happening in culture, like that's the purpose of like an agency executive in a lot of ways is what's happening in media, what's happening in advertising, what's happening in culture. How can we make this cool or relevant for what, your brand's objectives of selling blah blah are, which is why things like retainers exist, right? So I think that
Yeah.
idea, that thinking piece continues to be the most important thing. And also that is honed over years and experience and knowledge. And I've done that Christmas campaign 19 times. Let's do something different. That, you have that as well, Sam. So I think while the AI agents are able to replace some of like the basic tasks, spreadsheet, deck development, et cetera, they don't yet have that complex thinking. Although, of course, we've seen some example studies of testing MBA students versus AI agents where actually the results were better from the AI agents. So I think if it's like a totally open problem, that honestly, the AI agents are catching up to that too.
Look, if it's a problem that big data can fix, then I think that I would be scared to be that MBA student. If it is in a conversation and you're going back and forth with the CMO at a brand, and then you say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you guys were partnered with this other brand that we happen to know, and you get that CMO on the phone, and now you're having a three-way, and that creates opportunity. We've seen that happen time and time again. AIs can't compete. And
No,
again,
and
that's just
it's
about being
funny
human.
because
Like
we just got a really good, and I'll mention this because we've had on the folks from Tubi and from Pepsi over the years on the pod. So we got a really great piece today in Morning Brew about Tubi and Starry, which is one of the first like sort of sponsors of their first ever like branded integration for studios, which is really cool. That's the Issa Rae program that, is this fan-filled studio that we've been working on for a while. AI agents can't do that yet. Deal making, I guess.
I'm questionable if they ever will, but we'll move on. All right, Avery, I think the final topic to talk about, when this comes out, we are going to be a week away from this election. And so there's two ways I want to ask you about the election and just get your thoughts. So the first is purely from a brand perspective. After the election, no matter what the outcome, half of the US is going to be really angry. And they're going to be sad, and they're going to be pissed, and all of the things that come with losing, right? And because this has been framed as such an existential election on both sides of it, it's hard, I think, for the brands in our life to show up in any way that actually feels authentic. We've seen the brands as people, right? The Elons and the Taylor Swifts both choose their sides and be very public about that. But we haven't really seen the realities of what happens if you're now trying to communicate about your new chewing gum and people are worried about whether there's going to be riots in the streets. And so I guess, the first thing I want to ask you about is there, is it simply just a wait and see? Is it like, let's turn off for a week? What do you think is the right strategy for someone who still has to build a brand, but knowing that one of the larger markets that they're probably talking to is going to be in some sense of chaos for some amount of time? And that's whether or not we even know who the winner is on the 7th.
Yes, it will be chaos. It's funny because, we've been talking a lot around this in the context of like advertising campaigns and being sensitive. I think you never know what's going to happen in an election. There's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of chaos. And in different parts of the world, in the country, people feel different things. People are going to be happy or sad no matter what happens. I hate commenting on politics, Sam. What do you think? You're way
I
more
know you
politically
do.
inclined than I am.
Well, I think that you can't ignore it. I've noticed for myself, I work in the crypto media business. We have a lot of people on both sides of it. I think crypto and blockchain and innovation, frankly, should be a bipartisan initiative across the board, and we should be making smart decisions that benefit the most amount of people. I don't like that it's become this, and I do think it's created a lot of fractured friendships as well as fractured relationships, both with customers and brands and influencers and all of that kind of stuff. I think there's just a lot of challenge right now, but I also think it's sort of inauthentic to be American and like stay out of the fray, right? Like for every 4 years, we get to put our voice out there. And we did see a ton of brands over the years jump into everything from Black Lives Matter to all these other cause moments, climate, etc. And so
I
it
would
also
argue Black Lives Matter is not in the same category as being overtly political.
well, you would say that, except there is one of the political parties that would probably disagree with you. And so just throwing it out there that I think that taking stances on some of these things is part of the DNA of a brand, only in the sense that half of your customers may really align towards something. We are in a polarized society. And the way that I had this really interesting conversation at dinner the other night with a woman in the nonprofit space. And what she said, we were kind of going back and forth, and she was like, politics, I was sort of using the analogy that politics has become sports, and that in the same way people are loving sports right now because it's escapism, politics are almost the opposite of escapism. It's like full tribalism. And so I sort of was thinking about this idea of the politics of sport and the sport of politics as a kind of back and forth way to think about it. And then I saw this piece from the Edweek event that you were at that had this women's sports marketing panel, which was truly like a really interesting one to watch. And then I've also been paying attention to Polymarket, and I looked at the combination of those things, and I was like, wait a second, women's sports is like crushing right now and getting more and more popular. And like the Liberty just won, which is an amazing moment for New York.
Mhm.
And they're talking about these sort of investments that are happening in women's soccer and all of this other stuff. And, I was like, this is an amazing moment in the same way that men's sports, frankly, are crushing it. And then I switch over to polymarket.com, and you see that you can bet on the outcome of the election or who's going to win the popular vote, but you can also bet on the Super Bowl, or you can also bet on who's going to win the Champions League, or you can also bet on how many points the Celtics are to score, tomorrow night against the Timberwolves. And so it's the same people who, in some respects are looking at these as sport. And I was talking to this woman, and she said, it's because there's no such thing as party. It's all identity, and it's all about being part of something. And both rooting for your team and rooting for your political party now has become who you are. And so if it is become who you are, I don't think you can step out of that fray, whether you're a brand or you're a brand that happens to just also partner with a very popular TikToker who is going to also express their feelings because that they want to be authentic to who they are. So you almost can't stay out of it. And so I guess I'm having a challenge of trying to figure out, is the right strategy to be in it or to be out of it?
You are so in it. You are so in it, and I guess for me, I sort of separate, like, my personal views, and I try to separate my personal views and feelings from sort of, like, the business side of my role and personality, 'cause if I post anything, people will somehow, like, attribute it to Vayner or think this is
Mhm.
related to what I think for work, even if you say views are my own, which is I would hope is clearly true on my personal platforms. I think that especially though for younger consumers and like the Gen Alpha, Gen Z generations, they grow up being acutely aware of this stuff in a way that I don't think previous generations necessarily were, just because of the proliferation of individual views. We always could see things like the debates on TV, but now you can really see and feel what everybody thinks because of social media, right? Like you see so many individual messages and POVs, and I'm voting for so and so, and this in a way that you just weren't able to necessarily know or tell or see that before like 2010. Now you get that and you know that that's part of who you are. And a lot of people feel like they need to communicate that because they view this as such an important part of who they are. I do try to keep my own personal feelings somewhat out of the way we talk to clients about it and just keep it like super neutral. I want to also bring up an organization I think that could have had a misstep this week and really landed it, and that's McDonald's. So McDonald's, of course, Trump and Harris have both were trying to pull in the McDonald's experiences, et cetera. And they put out this amazing statement. It was like a masterclass in communications where
Mhm.
they talked about how their doors were open to everyone. And they referenced, the conversation that was happening on sort of both sides. And they were like, and our doors are open to everyone and anyone is welcome under our arches. And I thought it was just really well done in something that could have been a disaster. They just mitigated it in such a great way. So wanted to also take the opportunity to give flowers to an organization who maybe the individual person writing that message felt one way or the other, but they put it in a really clear way that managed to not isolate either party. Did you see that?
I did see it, and it's interesting because I think that the takeaway for that for me is one, McDonald's is America, and obviously McDonald's is global, but in America, McDonald's is seen as a very American brand. So yes, both parties want to capitalize on being seen as American. The closing down of McDonald's to give a presidential candidate a photo shoot did feel to me a little bit extra. And so I don't know the politics of whether that was at a corporate level or was done on a regional level, because I believe McDonald's were also franchisees. So I think that there's a good chance this was just someone who let this happen. That had its
Mhm.
own meta conversation that McDonald's was forced then to release that statement.
Exactly.
Secondly, secondly, the photo was frankly one of the weirdest photo shoots I've seen, and so many people were like, "I can't believe this isn't AI," because it like was shot in a way that made it look slightly fake, or at least the ones that were released, which I thought was interesting because that was part of the conversation, which is like, is this even real? Because of what was happening. But I do think that's an example of a brand being pulled into a campaign where the brand is doing everything it can to stay out of that campaign.
Exactly.
And to your point, and I agree with you, I don't want to make political part of my job. That's not my role in what I do today. My role is to help get attention for the news of our industry and the events of our industry. And I focus on that. Even if my close friends know where I lie. That doesn't mean that has to be an identity of my job. But I do think so many people are saying this is. And because we've seen both that backlash of DEI over the last couple of years and all this, it's like it just has become part of a workplace. The same people who are saying we should keep politics out of the workplace, especially within the innovation technology front, are the people who are going on Twitter and posting about the candidate they want to win. And so I do think that there is something very interesting about all of this that is coming to a head where I would love for us to refocus ourselves. So not everything has to be a contact sport when it comes to politics. And I'm very comfortably being friends with people who don't agree with me, but I don't know how to navigate that still from a brand perspective. We put out a op-ed that just said, purely from the data, we think that Trump probably will be better for the crypto industry, but at what
Right.
cost? Right. And so that's
But a
about
lot
it.
of people are single party voters, Sam. Or sorry,
Right.
single issue voters.
For sure. Well, both, frankly. But
Right.
yeah, so I don't know. I think it's something to watch. And I think we should, a month from now, do a little bit of review of how these brands reacted based on whatever the results are.
I think that's exactly right. And I do think in general, crypto, for the reasons the op-ed outlined very clearly, I think a lot of people were very active in the crypto industry. This is the single issue that matters the most to them, for better or worse. There's not too many of them. So it's a smaller group, but one that I think can be quite powerful.
Crypto is now, I believe, the largest financial lobbying commitment in this election this year,
Yep.
outside of the Elons and Bill Gateses and doing what they're doing. So I agree. All right, Avery, thank you for a great discussion. We're going to wrap it up here. We'll get back to our normal guests in the next week and beyond. But I love just being able to just mix it up with you and look forward to the next one.
Can't wait for the next Gen Z. Great to chat, Sam.